have to recognise the reality, and that, if people need skilled workers or workers to do jobs, you have to be able to give them the people. But a lot of money is spent on what you could call the people who are unemployable. They can't read, they can't write. This is why the government spends so much money on rehabilitation, because a lot of them have gone to prison. Literacy programs. There's no sort of magic cure, but there's normally numerous reasons why someone sort of comes out of education not in a particularly good place. Sadly, a lot of it's generational. It's not actually saying you can fix for this generation. The best thing you can do is try and, do better with the one after.
I think also if you had the educational resources available for people, guys I'm thinking about more now, who are 24 through 28, who suddenly click that, hold on a minute, they get a girlfriend, and they think they might like to get married, and they start to realise that their options are limited. I guess if you've got resources there, that would be a very smart idea, I think.
As we know, Wellington City councillors have opted not to ban the beggars. The council will look at bringing in kindness meters where people donate to receptacles around the city instead of to the beggars themselves.
Oh dear.
I'm trying to be kind, working out how to comment on this.
Don't we have kindness meters already known as taxes? If you know what I mean. I mean, is this what taxes are supposed to...
Stupid idea. It's a stupid... I mean, what are they thinking? Kindness meters. The fact of the matter is there aren't... we've got them in Christchurch as well. There's a certain number of people... I've heard the same story for one woman 5 times. She's had an argument with the boyfriend, can't get back to Wood End. And she's there the next day and she can't get back to Wood End. And we had the other story published the other day. A young fellow was offered food because he needed food, and he said, no, I want money. And then he got his iPhone out and he started texting on it. We've got a considerable group of people in New Zealand who do that. It's a great lark, and it raises money for grog and drugs. So a kindness meter isn't going to feature on the landscape where they're concerned.
Because presumably the money wouldn't be used to then allot money. It would be used to buy goods, and I think, a fair proportion of those people would prefer the cash, wouldn't they?
Yeah.
On our evidence in Christchurch, yes.
Yeah. Look, you've got charities like Downtown Community Missions, City Missions, that do a great job with people who need and want assistance. But there are some who don't want the assistance. They want cash for various purposes, and that's often there's alcohol or drug problems, or there may be psychiatric illnesses, and the cure isn't just putting up these kind meters around the place, etc.
I think the money from the kindness meters should go to provide love beads for people.
That's a very cynical view, if I may say so, but...
Feel free to say it.
Because you give to beggars because you see them and are touched by their plight, don't you?
Or you feel a bit intimidated because you're getting cash out of the ATM, and some of them can be quite threatening and harassing, not all of them by any means. But often it is, look, it's hard to work out those who genuinely are down on their luck, or, as we heard from Gary, those who are just making up stories to get money.
Celia Wade-Brown makes a point. She says the services to look after our dispossessed aren't sufficiently joined up, which is the same sort of point made by Anne Tolley, I suppose, in her new plan for SIFs. Do we need people who specialise in joining up services in government and local government? People who can integrate?
Well, that's another layer of bureaucracy there. It's not going to work. I mean, basically with begging, in New Zealand we have a pretty good system, and you mentioned the city missions and so on, and all sorts of worthy people wander around trying to help, and we do have government agencies, and we do have basic sickness benefits and so on. And another layer of bureaucracy is not going to make the slightest bit of difference.
We seem to have no problem, I heard this point being made today, we seem to have no problem collecting revenue on the streets and on the roads, but there seems to be a paucity of people to actually sort of be with beggars, inquire into their circumstances and so on. Is that a reasonable point to make too, actually?
Yep.
No.
One word answers in that case will suffice. Thank you. Gary McCormick, pleasure, and enjoy the live gigs.
Thank you.
And David Farrer, nice to have you back on the panel as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. The panel returns tomorrow, and coming up, Checkpoint with John Campbell.
Kia ora everyone, welcome to Checkpoint on RNZ National. I am John Campbell on behalf of the Checkpoint team. Thank you for joining us. Tonight, dangerous dogs and what to do with them. Does anyone have a clue? And your answer has to be fair, legal and practically enforceable. What did Bill English say about farm workers' hard-off benefits? Why? And did he mean it? Everyone's talking about the Panama Papers, but far fewer people have seen them. We talked to the New Zealander whose team is going through them. The best female cricketer in the world is a New Zealander. She joins us on the program. And Warren, 35 years with Cavalier and being made redundant. All of that and the high price of cauliflower in the next 90 minutes. But first, here's Katrina Batten with RNZ News.
Kia ora, good evening. 3 Tokoroa boys are being praised for their quick thinking in subduing a dog that attacked and left their companion with serious injuries. It's the 3rd dog attack in a week. The 16-year-old boy was set upon yesterday by a 3-year-old male pit bull boxer cross, which bit him in the chest and on his arms and legs. The South Waikato District Council Compliance Manager, Kerry Beckett, says his friends were able to grab the dog and sit on it until help arrived.
They could have run, a lot of kids would. And I just think that they need to be shown some sense of appreciation for what they did for their friend. It would have been incredibly brave for them to do that, and I just think that's pretty awesome.
Kerry Beckett says it's not clear if the dog escaped from a nearby property or was encouraged to attack the boys by its owner. The animal will be destroyed and the council and the police are investigating. Meanwhile, animal control officers are backing the government's refusal to ban dangerous dog breeds. The president of the Animal Control Officers Institute, Les Dalton, says while the problem of pit bull attacks is only getting worse, a ban isn't necessarily the answer.
It's going to be very difficult to ban the pit bull type as such because there's so much crossbreeding going on, and I would think it would be open to all sorts of legal challenges and DNA challenges as to whether it is or isn't a pit bull type. So I think that it's got to be heavier restrictions on people keeping those sorts of dogs.
Les Dalton says he supports having all pit bulls neutered and spayed to stop future breeding. Meanwhile, the Associate Local Government Minister, Louise Upston, says she's open to every suggestion on how to curb dog attacks. Ms Upton this morning said a ban was not a simple solution. She now says she's open to all options, but that there's a fine balance between reducing harm and not penalising every dog owner. The government has admitted it's aware of an overseas investment application that involves the law firm at the centre of the Panama Papers, Mossack Fonseca. The Labour Party says the government has been remarkably complacent about the application, given Mossack Fonseca's now caught up in an international scandal. In Parliament this afternoon, Labour's Grant Robertson asked what advice the government had received about the application. He says is to buy sensitive New Zealand land. The Finance Minister, Bill English, answered on behalf of the Prime Minister.
He's certainly aware of the transaction, but the government's not in a position where it can direct the OIO in its investigations. If it forms a view that there's questions of good character involved, then I would expect that they would investigate those.
Bill English, the Finance Minister. RNZ News has contacted the Land Information Minister's office for more detail about the application involving Mossack Fonseca, but has not received any response. Parliament's environmental watchdog says a government plan to take over the control of 1080 poison sounds like everything she wanted. The Environment Minister, Nick Smith, is proposing to make the rules for using 1080 and other pest control poisons nationally consistent, taking them out of the hands of regional councils. The Parliamentary Commissioner for the Environment, Jan Wright, called for the move in a major report 5 years ago, saying the rules were labyrinthine and costly. She says Dr Smith's changes sound good.
There are cases where, for instance, DOC might plan to do a drop over a forested area that might be partly in one region and partly in another and have entirely different conditions placed on it by the different councils, and so it makes it very difficult to operate.
Jan Wright says the plan will worry some people, but the public's view of 1080 is much more positive than it used to be. In sport, the White Ferns captain Susie Bates has been sitting on the news she's the world's best women's cricketer for several months. The cricketing Bible Wisden has named the White Ferns opening bat and Black Caps batsman Kane Williamson the leading cricketers in the world in 2015. Bates says given there are so many good cricketers around, she's pinching herself to make sure the award is real.
I actually was given the heads up by Wisden a few months back, so it's taken a while to come out, and I sort of had forgotten about it until last night, and it was a nice reminder that I'd had a pretty successful summer.
Susie Bates. The Blues Super Rugby campaign is suffering a major setback with top-performing open-side flanker Blake Gibson out for up to 10 weeks with a broken thumb. The injury happened at training this week. Former Chiefs flanker Tainaro Latimer is set to replace him in the Super Rugby game against the South African side, the Sharks. Meanwhile, the former All Black Zach Gilford has broken his foot, ruling him out of the Waratahs match against the Brumbies. Under fire, Manchester United manager Louis van Gaal says winning the FA Cup will have no bearing on his future at the football club. United reached the FA Cup semi-final with a 2-1 victory against West Ham this morning to set up a semi-final against Everton at Wembley. Van Gaal says while winning the cup is hugely important for the club, it won't dictate what happens to him. That's the news.
A dogfight.
There's been some attacks recently. I don't think it's as straightforward or as simple as banning a breed.
The bagging debate.
The overseas evidence clearly said to us, you can do one, it would look good, but it's not going to work.
Looking for Nessie.
We thought, oh wow, blow me down. That's the Sherlock Holmes Loch Ness Monster.
Searching for answers. Susie Ferguson and Guy and Espiner Morning Report, weekdays from 6. Then on 9 to noon, New Zealand's role in shaping the future of the Olympics. And after 10, author Jeff Manner, whose latest book looks at buildings through the eyes of those hoping to break into them. Join me, Catherine Ryan, on 9 to noon after Morning Report on RNZ National.
Met Service weather through to midnight tomorrow. Northland, occasional rain today with a few heavy falls in the far north. Cloudy periods and the odd shower tomorrow, but rain returning to the north late in the day. For the remainder of the North Island, mostly fine. Isolated showers about South Taranaki tomorrow morning. Nelson, Marlborough and Canterbury fine apart from some cloudy periods about Canterbury tomorrow. Bulla and Westland showers spreading north today, then clearing, fine spells tomorrow and patchy late drizzle about Westland. Otago and Southland mainly fine. A few showers about Southland and Clutha until tomorrow afternoon. Fiordland, occasional showers, and the Chatham Islands, cloudy periods and a few showers. It is coming up to 5:08.
Thank you very much indeed, Katrina. Welcome to Checkpoint, everyone. Coming up in the next few minutes, the Bill English comments, pretty damned hopeless about workers going off the benefits and into farms. What did he mean? The Kiwi whose team is looking at the Panama Papers, and the government being challenged on the reason it's giving for putting 2 Navy inshore patrol vessels up for sale. All of that coming up and a lot more tonight. But where does the government stand on dangerous dogs? As the Department of Internal Affairs undertakes a review into the most effective way of reducing dog attacks, and goodness, we've just had Katrina tell us about another one during the news, the minister responsible is saying all possible solutions are on the table. This appears to be a change of tune from her position on Morning Report only this morning. There, local government minister Louise Upston seemed to agree with the Prime Minister's stand that there will be no bans on breeds of dogs regarded as dangerous. Pit bulls being the obvious example, of course. Support for that position from some, opposition from others, which is itself perhaps indicative of what a confusing issue this is. In a moment, we ask the SPCA what they want to ban or not to ban. But first, where does the Minister stand on this?
I am open to all suggestions, and, that's going to come from the discussions that the IA have with local government. I'm particularly interested in the councils that, put additional restrictions on what they call menacing or dangerous dogs, because there are councils that have gone further than others. So it's about looking at what is best practice. How do we model what the councils that have got the least problem, what have they done that we can push across other councils? Is it a matter of saying all councils must do it this way, or is it just about sharing what we think works best? And one of the things that I want to look at, for example, is, do we have good data? That means collectively across local government and central government, we could make decisions based on that data. So that's one of the things that I've asked DIA to look at.
And do you not know the answer to that question yet? So you don't yet know whether you have really good, explicit and specific data around breeds?
We, from what I've received to date, the detail of the breed is not always captured in those incidents.
Are you surprised that you don't have, that we don't have, that the country doesn't have the specific data around the propensities of certain breeds to commit attacks? So in other words, the attacks are taking place, but this information is not being gathered, not being passed on, not being kept. What's happening that we don't know this stuff?
Well, as I said, individual councils have responsibility for some of this work. So in terms of that consistency, yes, there's a challenge. The extent of the challenge is what I've asked the department to look into. And part of it is that a large number of the breeds that people float around being concerned about, they're crossbreeds.
Okay, so let's get the elephant in the room very much on the table and just say pit bulls. So if I say to you, ban pit bulls, people want pit bulls banned, they are an awful, disastrous, dangerous dog, what's your response?
Yeah, so then there'll be individual councils that have greater rules around pit bulls. If there are pit bulls in their areas that have been designated because of their behaviour to be menacing and dangerous, there'll be some councils that have greater restrictions around them, including whether or not they are automatically neutered.
The poor old SPCA, we speak to them a bit on this program, and they're under huge financial pressure. I mean, they simply don't have enough money. And I wonder if they are in a nightmare position trying to run interference on this. For example, if a pit bull turns up at an SPCA, should they be trying to rehouse it? Should they instantly euthanize it? What's the balancing act for them?
Well, again, I'm not going to comment on the SPCA practices, but we're open to suggestions in terms of how we reduce harm, whether it's from local government or from the SPCA. I know in terms of any of the kennel associations and the breeders, they're all very interested in this, as long as the focus is on reducing harm.
So that's the local government minister, Louise Upston. Andrea Midgen is the CEO of the Auckland SPCA. She says banning a specific breed of dog won't work, and a task force should be set up to look at owners. That's coming up. But first of all, I asked her how the SPCA can do its job at all, where there seems to be uncertainty from the government and massive inconsistencies in regional, local government dog control.
Well, I think our role in this, John, is to get together, use the momentum of the moment now and actually get together a task force to nail this issue. And it needs to be multiple party, SPCA is here for cruelty and neglect. Councils are there for dog control. We need to work together with them. We have actually already got Council and NZVA, New Zealand Veterinary Association, on board to look at this issue and say, what can we do about it? And there is some things we can do.
But boy, it's confusing for you guys, because I was talking about this with the minister. You're the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff, you're doing the tidy-ups, you get the dogs turning up at the SPCA, you have no idea whether you rehome them or euthanize them, and boy, that's a big old gamut. They're real extremes. And also, you have to work with the massive regional inconsistencies. One council says one thing, one council says another. What would you like most of all?
I want that consistency there. Every animal should have a responsible pet owner. To be a responsible pet owner, that animal should be desexed. That person should be trained on how to manage that animal the most effectively in their environment. And there should be some support mechanisms for people that don't know how to manage their animals so that they can go cost effectively and get the training that's necessary.
Where does the SPCA stand now on the subject of pit bulls? If you're absolutely certain a dog is a pit bull, if it turns up at the SPCA and it appears on the face of it to be homeless, what do you do with it?
We do what we do with all animals that come through our centre. We health assess them, we temperament assess them, and depending on those two outcomes, we run with them and take them through to being adopted. We may foster them for some time if they have some behavioural issues that need to be addressed. And if we can't get over where we are comfortable about rehoming an animal, we will euthanize it, or sometimes there's some special programs like police dogs and things like that we can use particular animals for.
Okay, so everyone wants you to say, I guess, what the people aggressive breeds are, but what I sense you're telling me is that it's not that simple.
It's not that simple because if you get a puppy of any breed...
Any breed?
Any breed whatsoever, and you bring it up in an abusive, neglected environment, any breed of dog will potentially not be the best companion animal for you, for your family. But you take any breed of dog and put it into a loving environment that's got boundaries, that's fed, watered, sheltered, etc., and the chances are you will never have a problem with that dog.
Any breed?
Any breed.
So if you take a pit bull and put it in the environment you've just described, the chances are you won't have a problem with it?
Correct.
Okay, so therefore it is absolutely the owners and the environment, right? And the question is, how do we best police that?
And just coming back to, that people have been talking about banning, which is a really interesting way of approaching things. I mean, because what does that mean? But that has been done in many countries around the world and across the United States, and a lot of that law has been repealed because what they have found is the banning of a certain breed has not reduced any dog bites. Has been ineffective. So again, to come back to your last question, it's about people and how they bring up their, how they raise, the animal from a puppy and have training, have boundaries, be a responsible owner, have it de-sexed, have it registered. If there are issues coming up, deal with them. I mean, if your child started hitting kids at school, you wouldn't just sit back and let that continue, would you? You'd go and actually address that. Well, it's the same thing with the dog.
So there needs to be a register, and what would the register tell us? And also, do we need to be much more punitive on the owners of aggressive dogs?
Absolutely. Absolutely. If we had more funds and we had more inspectors on the ground, that's completely where we could be so much more proactive and reduce any harm, because it's around the management of that animal.
So you would in fact ban owners rather than ban breeds?
Yeah, that would be great.
Andrea Midgen, who is the CEO of the SPCA. We would love your feedback on that. The government is being challenged on the reasons it's giving for putting 2 Navy inshore patrol vessels up for sale, inshore being the important word here. The Defence Minister, Jerry Brownlee, says the government is looking for a buyer and would most likely sell them because they can't handle the big seas beyond New Zealand's 12-mile limit. Labor questions why the government would use inshore patrol vessels in the waters known as the exclusive economic zone, and when there's still a need for patrolling around the coast. What will they do? Here's our political editor, Jane Patterson.
The inshore patrol fleet was commissioned about 15 years ago after a review identified the need for fisheries protection, border control and search and rescue. For years, the Navy has said it couldn't put the whole fleet to sea because of a lack of skilled crew. The Defence Minister, Jerry Brownlee, now says once the ships get into the EEZ, the conditions become too challenging.
So we've got, of course, the Southern Ocean, a very big expanse of the Pacific to the east and the Tasman to our west. As you get further into some of the smaller island countries or perhaps into the coastal areas around Europe, these would be very good vessels to have.
He says the government does want to find a buyer.
And that process will begin. Remember that all military procurement, right at the time that you purchase it, has various disposal conditions on them, so we've got to meet all those as well.
Labour's Defence spokesperson Phil Goff says there's a reason they're called inshore patrol vessels.
These ships are not designed for the high seas. That's why they're called inshore patrol vessels. We have offshore patrol vessels that go down to the Southern Oceans and up into the Pacific. The advice that the Minister is giving you totally contradicts any information that we've received from the Defence Force over the last 3 and 4 years.
He says he finds it hard to believe the sale would be because of the ship's capabilities.
The Select Committee has received the opposite advice. The Select Committee has been told repeatedly by the New Zealand Defence Force that the reason that the ships are not at sea is because they haven't got the skilled staff to crew them. After the huge attrition in the Navy of 25% of the Navy leaving in 1 year, 2012, there's a massive skill shortage.
The Defence spokesperson for New Zealand First, Ron Mark, agrees.
It's not a problem with the vessels at all. It's a problem with crews, it's a problem with resourcing. National has governed this country for 17 of the last 26 years. This is happening on their watch, they're in command, it's up to them to front up and explain to the public why our fisheries protection fleet is basically sitting idle in port.
The Minister for Primary Industries, Nathan Guy, says fisheries protection is a joint effort between the Air Force, Fisheries, Intelligence Information and the Navy. He wouldn't offer an opinion when asked if the sale of 2 patrol vessels would compromise that capability.
I'm not prepared to speculate on that. At the moment we've got a very good approach. We work across all of the government, we work across with other countries, sharing intelligence. We share a huge amount of information, so we have a pretty good idea of what's happening.
The Prime Minister, John Campbell, says it makes sense for the Navy to sell assets it's not using and recycle the capital elsewhere. From Parliament for Checkpoint, Jane Patterson.
Coming up to 21 minutes past 5, the Deputy Prime Minister, who is standing by on the phone, I believe, is unapologetic for labelling beneficiaries hired to work on farms as pretty damned useless. Bill English has come under fire from opposition parties and unions who say his comments were disgraceful and the government has given up on young people. Here is our political reporter, May Heron.
Bill English was speaking at a Federated Farmers meeting in Fielding last week when he was asked about increasing migrant workers on dairy farms. The following is a clip of what he said, recorded by the Labour MP Ian Lees-Galloway, who was there.
If you have a whole lot of migrant labour coming in, it does mean we'll have people who are never going to work. And the dairy industry is, a lot of the Kiwis who are immediately available are pretty damned hopeless. They won't show up, you can't rely on them, and that is one of the reasons why the immigration's a bit permissive, fill that gap. But, you know, we can't leave that problem unsolved, which is, in the long run, your problem as well as ours. And that is a cohort of Kiwis who now can't get a licence because they can't read and write properly, and don't look to be employable, you know, basically young males. And if we don't work together to get them working, then they'll be with us a long time doing nothing.
The Labour Party has accused Bill English of writing off a whole generation of New Zealanders and says it's the government that is useless for not having faith in their own education system. The Council of Trade Unions wants Mr English to apologise and says it was a foolish thing to say and shows a lack of understanding about working people and their lives. The Green Party co-leader, Mitiria Ture, agrees.
They treat those New Zealanders who are struggling with contempt, that there is no real respect for the fact that ordinary New Zealanders are finding it harder and harder to make ends meet and to get decent jobs.
But the Prime Minister, John Campbell, is backing his deputy.
It is a real case of the Labour Party once again trying to smear a National Party minister and using misinformation to do that.
A beneficiary advocate, Kay Brereton, says the reason people don't turn up for the farming jobs is because they're forced to work in unsafe environments and they only get paid for 40 hours a week when in reality they're on the job a lot longer. But she says there is a problem with a lot of beneficiaries being able to read and write.
These people are not actually employable at present while they have low literacy. They can't read their employment agreements, they can't adequately negotiate, they don't understand their rights, they don't understand instructions, and work and income needs to get on board and start working on much more literacy, seeing that as a basic skill that they need to make sure all job seekers have.
The Vice Chair of the Otago Young Farmers Club says Bill English's comments are right on the mark. Mike Marshall milks 500 cows and says he employs people from Scotland because New Zealanders aren't good workers.
The ones we've had have been very lazy and would rather go home and watch TV than do that little bit extra to make the cows happy. They just don't seem to think that if they get their paycheck, that's all that matters, whereas they nearly need a bonus or some sort of scheme to get them to work harder.
Mike Marshall says he's glad Mr English stood up and said what everyone else in the farming industry is already thinking. From Parliament for Checkpoint, May Heron.
Bill English joins us on the line now. Are you there, Minister?
I am. Good evening.
Yeah, good evening. Nice to talk to you. Did you just take a group of people who are already finding it difficult to get work and stigmatise them even further?
No. And I think Kay Brereton there, that you reported, put her finger on it. We've done an awful lot of analysis, more than any government's done actually, to understand pretty much to an individual level what the challenges that young New Zealanders have about getting off welfare and into work, because we know that if they don't get work early, they can end up on welfare for a long, long time, and that's now become crystal clear. And so you have some people who are dealing with the issues Kay mentioned. They're not literate and numerate, and we've got to work towards individual support for people in those cases. And then there's others who do have some capabilities, but as described by your other interviewee there, the farmer, we go to trouble getting them a job, but a support they don't necessarily turn up.
Yeah, they're nuances and subtleties, and they sound very reasonable and persuasive now. But you stood in front of a group of employers and you described these people as pretty damned hopeless. And I wonder in what way that is helpful to anyone.
It's helpful in this sense that we can have a straightforward discussion about what really goes on. You know, we've dug deep into the core of long-term dependency and dysfunction that taxpayers are financing, and actually and worse than that, create long-term miserable lives on very low incomes. And what we found is that being straightforward about the risk factors, being straightforward about what's actually happening, cuts through a kind of fog of good intentions that have spent a lot of money and not delivered much in the way of results. And in dealing with the groups themselves, the people who are caught in all this, they're keen to see the government understands exactly what the issues are.
Look, a fog of good intentions is surely better than vilification, isn't it? I mean, if we look at this group of people, we have the second highest youth suicide rate in the OECD. We have one of the highest rates of imprisonment in the OECD. You describe these people when they join the workforce as pretty damned hopeless. Could the outlook be any more grim for them? And isn't this a government that believes in high ceilings and aspiration?
Yes, it is, and but it's time. It's time to call it what it is, because we need to achieve more, and that is why we've released all the analysis that we've done that shows this tight nexus between offending, SIS notifications, long-term welfare. It's all part of the social investment approach we're taking, which is about working out where to apply our resource so that we get a long-term payoff. And for instance, the young Kiwis who are referred to farm jobs and don't show up, and the dairy industry tells us that, and actually what I said was the dairy industry tells us they're pretty useless.
And what Helen Kelly tells us is that they're required to work incredibly long hours, that many of them have no experience whatsoever on farms, that they're confused, they're estranged, they're bewildered, and actually don't know what the hell they're doing.
And so the lesson out of that is there's a number of lessons. One is, if it's work they just can't do and are never going to do, then we've got to find somewhere else to refer them. We've got to find different sorts of jobs. So the feedback from the farming community telling us these kids can't do these jobs, they won't show up, they can't stick at it, we've got to learn from it. Of course you're not writing them off, because we're working with them increasingly individually.
So the next time one of these kids turns up for a job interview and the potential employer says, well, the Minister of Finance says you're pretty damned hopeless, what should they say back?
Well, I don't think no one's going to have an interview with someone who they think is, not going to be capable of doing the job.
Okay. Can we just ask you, I'm not sure about this and we haven't been able to confirm this independently, but Labour is saying Mossack Fonseca is involved in an application to buy sensitive New Zealand land. They raised it in the House this afternoon. You commented back. What do you know about it?
I don't know much other than what you've just said, John. So the way any application here has to go through the Overseas Investment Act criteria. There's something like 23 tests. One of them is a good character test. These tests have been reviewed by the courts in recent years. They're thorough and complex, and so it's the task of the Overseas Investment Office to ensure that people, for instance, meet a good character test, not just when they buy an asset, but that later they can also pass the test.
In the current circumstances, would you expect Mossack Fonseca to meet a good character test?
Well, that's really a matter for the OIO. All we know about this company is it's got people involved in tax issues. That doesn't necessarily mean that the client they have or the person who came and bought the asset wouldn't pass the test. That's got to be dealt with under our law, and it's got to be dealt with fairly and reasonably because it's subject to judicial oversight, effectively.
Okay, do you know where the land is?
No, I don't, no.
Okay, so you know nothing more about this than what you learned in Parliament this afternoon, or did you already know about it?
I think it was raised yesterday in Parliament too, actually, so that's when it came to my attention.
Okay, so have you tried to find out any more about it since yesterday?
Well, the Minister of Land Information is in the position to do that, to find out, but finding out more about it doesn't substitute for the fact that the Overseas Investment Office have to deal with it under their statutory independence and apply the good character test, which I've seen in applications that I've actually dealt with is reasonably thorough, but they can't, well, pretty thorough, but they can't account for all behaviour of everybody overseas, over the last 20 years.
Bill English, Minister of Finance, thank you very much indeed for joining us this evening. We appreciate your time. Coming up on Checkpoint, around 65 jobs set to go at Cavalier Bremworth. We talked to a man who's been with them for 35 years. Richie McCaw receives his Order of New Zealand. We're also going to talk to Susie Bates, the best female cricketer in the world. And Auckland man is in shock after discovering one half of the ex-state duplex he lives in is about to be demolished. And more, including the price of cauliflowers, $10 a head. Katrina Batten, but all of that is going to be preceded by the aforementioned Katrina with the headlines.
Thank you, John. The Associate Local Government Minister, Louise Upston, says she's open to every suggestion on how to curb dog attacks. Ms Upton this morning said a ban was not a simple solution. Tonight she's told Checkpoint she's open to all options, but there's a fine balance between reducing harm and not penalising every dog owner. 3 people have been hurt in separate dog attacks within a week in Takanini, Tokoroa and Christchurch. The government has admitted it's aware of an overseas investment application that involves the law firm at the centre of the Panama Papers, Mossack Fonseca. In Parliament, Labour's Grant Robertson asked what advice the government had received about the application, which he said was to buy sensitive New Zealand land. Bill English for the Prime Minister replied that John Key was aware of the transaction, but the government could not direct the Overseas Investment Office in its investigations. The Defence Minister says the likely sale of 2 of the Navy's inshore patrol vessels is justified because they can't handle the big seas past New Zealand's 12-mile limit. Jerry Brownlee says once the ships are out of the 12-mile zone, the conditions become too challenging. The Parliamentary Commissioner for the Environment says a government plan to take over the control of 1080 poison sounds like everything she wanted. The Environment Minister is proposing to make the rules for using 1080 and other pest control poisons nationally consistent, taking them out of the hands of regional councils. 2 New Zealand players have been named as the world's leading cricketers in 2015 by the cricketing Bible Wisden. They're the White Ferns' Susie Bates and the Black Caps' Kane Williamson. And I'm sure John at some stage will be talking to Susie Bates coming up.
In about 2.5 minutes.
Fantastic.
More or less. Thank you very much. Turning to business news now. Thank you, Katrina. And there's been a bit of financial market storm today about the leak of an interest rate decision. Economics correspondent Patrick O'Mara has been looking at it, and he's joining us now live from Wellington. Welcome, Patrick. What can you tell us about this?
Well, John, this all came about from a blogger and former central bank official, Michael Riddell. Now, after the interest rate decision that came out on March the 10th, he blogged that he'd been contacted by somebody before the release of the information, the embargoed release of the information, saying the Reserve Bank had cut. Now, they did cut, as you remember, to 2.25%, and that was a record low and a bit of a surprise. The Reserve Bank, understandably, were quite concerned that he had received this information before he should have, because, of course, this is market-sensitive information. And just to give you a kind of sense of that when the Reserve Bank did cut, it dropped the dollar by about 1 cent. Now, they've investigated, they called Deloitte in to have a look at that the day after. They've now come back and they've said that actually it was News Hub MediaWorks, a journalist there, had basically sent the decision to others within MediaWorks, and another one of their reporters had then contacted Michael Riddell. Now, Michael Riddell himself was a former Reserve Bank official himself, so he probably understood more than most how serious this decision was, because if it had got out there and had been used in a way to try and have information which could have been used for some sort of gain on financial markets that could have been very, very serious. Now, that didn't happen. He held the information and then he contacted the Reserve Bank. Now, look, I've been to these lockups many times over many years, and what you do is you hand in your phone, but what nowadays is, of course, is you walk in there with your laptop is internet connected inside. They take it basically on trust. Now, in this situation, that trust has broken down and the Reserve Bank has acted.
OK, you have a comment from Cameron Bagri too, do you, Patrick?
Yeah, well, look, it's not just journalists who are inconvenienced in this situation. The financial analysts who have their own lockup, they're upset too. And Cameron Bagri, he's saying that one person's idiocy has ruined it for the rest.
On one level, I can understand why the Reserve Bank is taking these steps. There was a problem. The easiest way to close down that problem is to take the steps they have done. Unfortunately, that means you're one twit, you're one idiot. By taking some steps, stuffed it up for everybody else.
It's Cameron Bagri from the ANZ. What happened on the markets today, Patrick?
Well, on the markets, John, we had the record closing at a record high, up 46 points at 6,824, rapidly getting to that 7,000 mark. The dollar's weaker after that Reserve Bank outcome. It's at 68.43 US and 89.33 Australian.
Our economics correspondent, Patrick O'Mara. Thank you, Patrick. 5:36 is the time. Black cap Kane Williamson and White Fern skipper Susie Bates have joined cricket's True Elite, the 2016 edition of the Cricket Annual Wisden, which is the Bible for cricket lovers, really. His name both as the world's best cricketers. Fantastic. Wisden described Ms Bates as one of the power hitters of the women's game in 2015, not least when she scored 258 during a whitewash of Sri Lanka. I spoke with Susie in her hometown of Dunedin this morning and asked her how exciting it is to be the best female cricketer in the world.
Yeah, when you put it like that, it is pretty exciting, and I guess it's just you look back on the last 12 months and you feel pretty proud of what you've done, and it just makes it all worth it, I guess. And to get recognised like this, it just drives me even more because I love the game so much.
When did you find out? How did you find out?
Yeah, well, I actually got rung when I was playing in Perth before Christmas by Wisden to give me the heads up, and then they said it wasn't going to be announced until April, so I've had to keep it pretty quiet. Since then, I obviously told my parents and a few people pretty close, but I've had to keep it under wraps, and last night when it came out, just the messages of support was really nice, and I'm on a bit of a break from cricket, but it is nice to have an award like this after a pretty successful year with the White Ferns.
A fantastic year with the White Ferns. Such a successful year, both personally and as a team. Tell me about your childhood. You told your parents when you found out when you were playing in Perth. Did you play lots of cricket in the backyard as a little girl?
Yeah, I sure did. I think most people my age that play women's cricket had brothers or dads and mums that got them out in the backyard, and my two brothers, Tom and Henry, played cricket right through the age groups, and I just wanted to get out and join in with them. And I remember vividly some of those after school nights where Tom batted for hours and I was just made to bowl and sometimes didn't get a bat. So he'd also make me bowl even closer because I wasn't fast enough, but they still love following it, and they've stopped playing now, but that's where I guess I fell in love with the game and just joined a boys club team after that.
And the wonderful thing about brothers is that they're so unsentimental, right? I mean, in some respects, if you can survive playing against your brothers, you can kind of survive anything, can't you?
Yeah, exactly. I remember when their friends came around, I perhaps wasn't good enough to play. They sort of said, oh, no, you don't play. They were embarrassed to play with a younger sister, but eventually they let me join in because they realised I wasn't too bad. And ever since then, I guess they've kept me pretty grounded and remind me when I don't score runs, but also on the flip side, they have been really supportive and proud of what I've been able to do in the New Zealand side.
I think the other thing you've been able to do, and the team has been able to do, is take women's cricket from out of the shadows. I mean, suddenly people are talking about the team, suddenly you're live on the telly, suddenly people are watching you, suddenly people are engaging with you. That's happened really recently, and that must be something you're very proud of.
Yeah, and I think today with the award and I guess the messages I've received in the media, that's probably been the thing I'm most proud of is people are starting to talk about us and the way the girls have gone about their cricket in the last 2 years. It's just, I've always known that people would have loved the game if they'd seen it, and those ones that have been close to it and been supportive of it have seen how much work the girls put in, and it's just nice that the public now, I guess, have access to that and can start following the team and start, young girls can have their favourite female players. I know growing up, my favourite players were the likes of Nathan Astle, and so hopefully girls are talking about Sophie Devine and Rachel Priest and Sarah McGlashan as their idols, and that's probably what's most special about being a female cricketer at the moment, is you can really sense that the public are getting behind us, and young girls now can aspire to be female role models.
And Susie Bates, you didn't mention your own name. There are lots of little kids starting out in the backyard, seriously, with their brothers and sisters wanting to be you when they grow up, and that's a magic thing, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, and you know, when I was young, I have pictures of when I first started playing cricket, and you just went out there and enjoyed it, and it is pretty special that girls now might be wearing the pink White Ferns top with Bates on the back of it, and if I see that around, it will feel pretty special. But as long as they're playing cricket, doesn't really matter who they look up to.
Susie Bates, the best in the world. 90 minutes to 6. Cavalier carpet workers in Whanganui have been meeting with their employer and the union today in an attempt to understand what's happening to them. Somewhere in the region of 65 positions are going, although the final outcome is confusing, with 3 sites involved, Christchurch, Napier and Whanganui, and some relocations on the table. But when you're in your 60s and you've been with the company 35 years, starting again is going to be tough. That's Warren Goodman's position, an electrician who's helped build machinery and make machinery do things it was never designed to do. He is being made redundant. He has immense pride in what the workforce there has achieved. But
apart from that, you know, everyone down here is still pretty much in shock, and you know, the heads are spinning out. It's a hard one to deal with. You know, it was all of a sudden for us, no pre-warning.
Yeah.
We won't know probably for 3 or 4 weeks by the sound of it where we stand and where we go from there. That's after they've done all their consultation process with the unions and stuff.
Yeah. Warren, you talked about altering machinery, you talked about building stuff, you talked about making things happen that probably had never happened anywhere else before. Do you feel a little bit let down now that you're all being let go like this after all you've done?
Yeah, it's very disappointing. Hurts on the inside, all right. But, yeah, no, it's a shame to see it getting fired off somewhere else, but I mean, that's the way the world's moving, unfortunately. We can't do much about it, can we?
Will you go with them? Will you be able to move if they relocate the kind of work you're doing to Napier, for example?
No, there's no spare jobs there for electricians. I'll have to suss it out. I won't know where I'm at until we get through this process at the moment.
Yeah. Did you have any sense that this was coming, having been there for so long? Did anyone take you aside and say, hey, you know, maybe you should look around for something? Or, you know, did anyone give you any inkling that your job of 35 years was really on the line?
No, not at all. We went into that meeting thinking it was the new health and safety rules going to be thrown at us and pushed down our throat, but it was nothing to do with that. Because we come in the morning, they'd been in at night and shut down the night shifts early so they could come back in the afternoon. So we didn't know all this. We arrived in the morning and carried on as normal until they told us there was a meeting at 2, and we went not thinking that much about it really. It was, so it was one hell of a shock to everyone.
Warren, who's been with Cavalier for 35 years. A judge in Lebanon has urged an Australian mother who travelled to Beirut with a television crew in an attempt to get her children back to reach a custody agreement with her estranged husband, who was with the kids in Beirut. Sally Faulkner and a crew from 60 Minutes flew to Lebanon last week, where a child recovery agency snatched the 2 children from their paternal grandmother at a bus stop in the middle of the day. Ms Faulkner, 4 television crew members and the agents involved in the snatch were all arrested and they face charges, including kidnapping. Overnight, they all appeared before a judge who made the recommendation to Ms Faulkner. Joining us now is Professor of International Law at the Australian National University, David Rothwell. Professor Rothwell, Donald Rothwell. Professor Rothwell, lovely to have you on the line. Thank you for joining us.
You're welcome.
Where are they at? Where are particularly the 60 Minutes crew at? Because the judge seems to be setting aside Sally Faulkner and saying, look, this is a custody dispute, I understand that. But the TV crew, where do they stand?
Look, their circumstances still remain under investigation. They have been subject to questioning, obviously, by the Lebanese authorities, but in the last 48 hours, also questioned by the Lebanese judge. As I understand it, the proceedings before the judge have been suspended for the remainder of the week to be resumed early next week. But at the moment, they are quite literally sitting in a legal limbo.
As a professor of international law, what's the Lebanese system? Is it a bit like the French system? Is it inquisitorial? The judge can totally join in?
That's right. So obviously the judge is relying upon a basic prosecution brief that has been prepared by the relevant police authorities in Beirut. But the judge is currently conducting his own investigation into the matter, and as we've seen, he's prepared to take quite a wide-ranging approach to that.
And so what is his mandate? What are his potential reactions under the law as it stands? Can he say, off you go? Does he have the power to do that at this stage?
Yes, he does. So because we haven't had any formal charges laid against any of the parties involved in this matter, we are still at the investigatory stage. So yes, the whole range of options are open, including releasing the individuals involved, in addition to, of course, the laying of very serious charges, and then formal criminal proceedings ultimately commencing.
Yeah, that's still on the table, isn't it? In the meantime, he's saying to Sally Faulkner, can you do a deal with your estranged husband, right? So there is a sort of strange process of mediation taking place as well.
That's right, and so that's been quite a novel development overnight, but it is consistent with an agreement that Australia and Lebanon have,
right.
Which was concluded in 2009, which is really designed to provide for some resolution of these inter-country adoption and custody dispute issues. It's surprising that it hasn't been activated to date, but the Australian ambassador apparently intervened in the matter yesterday. And so I suspect that what has happened is that the Australian and Lebanese foreign ministries have activated this agreement, and the judge has gone back to the two parents, basically seeking to reach a reconciliation in terms of the custody issue, but that really doesn't resolve the criminal charges that might arise from the snatching of the two children on the Beirut streets. And
the participation of the 60 Minutes crew. Gosh, this is a fascinating case. Dr. Donald Rothwell, who is the International Law Professor at Australian National University, thank you very much indeed for your time and expertise this evening. It is just coming up to 12 minutes to 6. Richie McCaw officially joined an elite group of New Zealanders today, accepting his appointment to the Order of New Zealand, the highest of our honours. He's the youngest on the list by more than 30 years. In second place, former Prime Minister Helen Clark. Our Wellington reporter Max Toll was at Government House for the glitz and the glamour.
Richie McCaw shot a cheeky smile to his family and girlfriend before today's formal ceremony. He says on days like this, he's glad to have them flanking him.
Things like this, people talk about it when you play sport or whatever you represent, who you're representing. You probably don't think of it so much when you're running out in the rugby field. You think about what you're going to do, but in times like this, you do. You can see that they're proud of what you've been able to achieve, and I guess you are representing them too.
He says he had a few butterflies too. His award is so prestigious, only 20 New Zealanders can gain membership at one time. Sir Edmund Hillary got it, Dame Kiri Takanawa, Jim Bolger and Sir Murray Halberg are current members, and now Richie. But it's not Sir Richie yet.
The fact that this is the highest honour you can get, that's pretty special in itself.
McCaw informally turned down a knighthood after the All Blacks won the World Cup in 2011, saying he wanted to wait until he stopped playing. He says the title wouldn't sit well with him.
As a young man, you still want to be able to, integrate yourself with your mates and that as normal, and not having a title like that actually makes it somewhat easier.
His achievements need no introduction, but here goes. He's the most capped Test rugby player of all time, has been awarded the IRB Player of the Year a record 3 times, and led the All Blacks to World Cup glory twice. He says this, though, ranks near the top.
When you play rugby or, represent your country, you don't expect to have something like this bestowed on you. I guess you receive it on behalf of, people that you've represented, and I guess it's recognition of the hard work you put in to try and represent your country the best you can, and that's, I guess, what I've done for a while.
Once he puts the suit away and hangs his newest medal up, he says it's back to flying choppers down south tomorrow. Meanwhile, rugby referee Colin Hawke, political journalist John Armstrong and Archbishop William Brown Tuerde were also honoured today. For Checkpoint, Max Toll.
That's Richie McCaw. That was Richie McCaw. Lots of lovely feedback on Susie Bates. We're going to pass that on to her. She'll be delighted. Thank you all. In Auckland, it's 10 minutes to 6, and Auckland man says he's in shock after discovering one half of his ex-state duplex in Remuera is about to be removed. Mohamed Al-Wahab lives on the one side of a 2-unit brick and weatherboard house, typical of many built in the middle of last century. Many of you will be able to picture them exactly, but at the weekend his neighbours told him they're taking their half away. The Auckland Council says it has no problems with the move, and that means hundreds of Aucklanders could one day find themselves in exactly the same predicament. Is this a precedent? Rowan Quinn reports.
Mohamed Al-Wahab says the first he heard of the project was when his neighbours came to him with their plans and a signed-off building consent. He says he was shocked and confused and can't understand why he wasn't told earlier.
If they told me, I would have enough time to plan and talk and negotiate and probably sit with the neighbour and come up with a solution which doesn't impact me, doesn't impact them, and we come up with a solution. But the whole thing done in secrecy, and I can't understand how the neighbour can do this.
Despite the fact half his building's been removed, the council deemed the effects on Mr Al-Wahab and his family to be less than minor. That means the neighbours were under no obligation to notify him of their plans. It's more or less deemed none of his business. A leading Auckland architect with 36 years in the profession, Pip Cheshire, says he's never come across half a duplex being removed in New Zealand.
I'm sure that one can do it technically, and I presume that one can do it legally, but as to the underlying planning and the kind of common sense of it, it just seems absurd to me.
And Mr Cheshire says the job will be relatively challenging, and he finds it astounding that the council would consider the effects less than minor.
The big issue is whether this guy needs to be pushed into this position without having any say in it whatsoever. You'd rather think that he might have been party to some conversation with the neighbour and the council a great deal earlier than it appears he has been.
The Auckland Council says when one half of the duplex is removed, a double brick wall will be left all the way to the peak of the roof, and it says Mr Al-Wahab's home will remain weathertight. But Mr Cheshire is not convinced, and Mr Al-Wahab says he's been looking into the success of similar jobs in Australia.
All the trials of cutting a semi-detached house end with instability and disaster. Probably there will be no problem in the immediate term, but in the long term, the earth movement and the security and the safety of the structure is very difficult to maintain.
Auckland Council's Building Inspections Manager Jeff Farrinson says while the owners didn't need to tell Mr Wahab of their plans, they are required to make sure his home is not harmed.
Structurally, we really didn't have an issue with anything that's going with this wall. It was just the methodology of making sure that it's done piece by piece. You don't want to go in there and just bowl that house down without making sure you've got temporary propping as you go.
Mr Farrinson says council inspectors will be keeping a close eye on the job with regular visits, and he expects the disruption to Mr Al-Wahab and his family will be minimal.
With the double skin wall in these older type state houses, they're very good at sound insulation, fire. They cover off a whole lot of issues that you'd have when you live next door to someone like this. So having working on the outside of it, they shouldn't intrude at all into the property of 76.
The owners of the other side of the duplex couldn't be reached for comment, but they're planning to put a freestanding home on the site. Mr Al-Wahab says a legal injunction to stop the work would cost about $20,000, and he's now weighing up whether he'd be better off putting the money towards an architectural solution to his problem. For Checkpoint, Rowan Quinn.
After years of decline, the humble old cauliflower has suddenly become hip, with some even calling it the cauliflower. I hadn't heard that. But it comes at a price. At Easter weekend, it was selling for as much as $10 in supermarkets around the country. The price has since come down, but it's still dear for a vegetable. You'll pay $6 a head at trendy food chains like Farrow Fresh, $5 at Countdown and $4.89 at New World. I asked Hao Young, CEO of the New Zealand Chinese Growers Association, what's making them so expensive.
Well, it's all due to climatic conditions, John. I mean, as you well know, the nights are hot and daytime temperatures are, being reasonably hot as well. Cauliflower don't like that. They like a cool night temperature and a warm daytime temperature.
And so what happens if they have warm nights? What do?
Well, they shut down. They don't grow very fast. Like I monitor crops of cauliflower, and they're just not maturing. They're not growing.
And also, I hear they're rotting from the inside. Do they do that if it's warm at night time?
Well, we had a bit of rain earlier on, which, you get the rain and then you get the humid conditions, so the disease comes into the crops. Yeah.
Okay, so this is kind of worrying, isn't it? Because as the world gets warmer, and that's now indisputably a fact, are we going to see more of this?
Well, unless we growing types of vegetables that can take these kind of conditions, then it might be okay. But normally, everyone plants certain varieties at certain time of the year for the conditions. And if the conditions go out of kilter, then the variety doesn't actually like it.
How long have you been out there for, Hal? How long have you been putting cauliflower in the ground or watching them grow?
Since 1950.
Wow! And so, how old are you, Hal?
I'm only 68.
Wow. So, is this one of the worst seasons you've ever seen?
Well, we've never seen cauliflower selling in the shops so dear. No, I don't think in my lifetime I've seen it. But I mean, that's the conditions and that's the supply. That's supply and demand. I mean, I'm sure retailers could sell it a little bit cheaper. Don't make so much margin on it if they wanted to.
Okay, so you've got a supply situation, you've got a quality situation, and there's a sense possibly that retailers are clipping the ticket a bit, Hal.
Well, I'm sure. I think the price to the grower did actually get up to about $60 a crate, which is about a crate of 8 cauliflower. Yeah, so that would be a record, I would say.
Wow.
Yeah, keep buying those collies, John.
Yeah, I love collies. I love.
They're only $19.50 in Rarotonga.
Okay, I won't buy them in Rarotonga, Hal. How young? Don't buy collies in Rarotonga. A quadriplegic man paralysed in a diving accident 6 years ago has been able to move his fingers, hand and wrist after a tiny computer chip implanted in his brain worked.
This is Ian Burkhart of Ohio. His hands and legs were permanently paralyzed in a diving accident when he was 19 years old. But now, with the help of a new breakthrough computer chip implanted in his brain, the now 24-year-old is playing Guitar Hero.
When we first hooked everything up, for the first time of being able to move my hand, it was a big shock because, it's something that I hadn't moved in about 3.5 years at that point. Now it's more of something where I expect it to move.
The small pea-sized computer chip relays signals from Burkhart's brain through 130 electrodes to his forearm, allowing his mind to guide his hands and fingers, bypassing his damaged spinal cord. On Wednesday, scientists and neurosurgeons describing this quadriplegic's accomplishments as a milestone in the evolution of brain-computer interface technology.
This really provides hope, we believe, for many patients in the future as this technology evolves and matures.
Burkhart says the progress is moving along faster than he imagined.
The biggest dream would be to get full function of my hand back, both my hands, because then that allows you to be a lot more independent and not have to rely on people for kind of simple day-to-day tasks that you take for granted.
Scientists are working to improve the technology, which for now can only be used in the laboratory, and move toward a wireless system, bringing Burkhart another step closer to his dream.
Extraordinary. Lots of feedback coming in this evening. So Mr English has supposedly identified the problem of New Zealand youth's employment inhibitors. As the government is responsible for the education and environment of our youth's upbringing, has he offered any solutions? I think not. Bill English is right if they use the right definition of hopeless, says Leon from Christchurch. Bill English is disgusting the way he's writing off young New Zealand men, train them, educate them, two things this government has not done, says Di. But this listener says Bill English has spoken the truth. That's the only way to address this problem. Good on him. Thank you for your feedback. Catherine points out Susie Bates also represented New Zealand at basketball in the 2008 Olympics. What a woman. Kia ora everyone, you are listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. Thank you for being with us at 6 o'clock. It's lovely to have your company. We're 2/3 of the way through the program tonight, but still to come. We look more at pit bulls and we ask a woman who is a very passionate supporter of them, are they inherently bad dogs? And if not, why is their rap so bad? Pushing ahead with controversial proposals to change the way Māori land is handled and cashing in on a hungry and increasingly large middle class in Asia. How does New Zealand do that and maintain some integrity in the process of farming? All of that to be discussed in the next 29 minutes. Katrina Batten, but first the RNZ News.
Ngā mihi nui, good evening. The Associate Local Government Minister, Louise Upston, says she's open to every suggestion on how to curb dog attacks. In the third dog attack within a week, a 16-year-old Tokoroa boy has suffered serious injuries. The boy was with 3 friends yesterday when they were confronted by a 3-year-old male pit bull boxer cross. A 7-year-old boy and a pregnant woman have been attacked by dogs in recent days, sparking calls for pit bull breeds to be banned. This morning, Ms Upston said a ban was not a simple solution. She's now told Checkpoint she's open to everything.
I am open to all suggestions. I'm particularly interested in the councils that, put additional restrictions on what they call menacing or dangerous dogs, because there are councils that have gone further than others. So it's about looking at what is best practice. The councils that have got the least problem, what have they done that we can push across other councils?
Louise Upston, the Associate Local Government Minister. The government has admitted it's aware of an overseas investment application that involves the law firm at the centre of the Panama Papers, Mossack Fonseca. The Labour Party says the government is being remarkably complacent about the application, given Mossack Fonseca is caught up in an international scandal. Here's our Deputy Political Editor, Chris Bramwell.
In Parliament today, Labour's Grant Robertson asked what advice the government had received about the application he says is to buy sensitive New Zealand land. The Finance Minister, Bill English, says the government was certainly aware of the transaction, but it's not in a position where it can direct the OIO in its investigations. But he says if it forms a view there are questions of good character involved, he'd expect it to investigate those. RNZ News has contacted the Land Information Minister's office for more detail about the application, but has yet to get a response. From Parliament, Chris Bramwell.
An Auckland man says he was shocked to discover his neighbours could remove half of the building he lives in without having to tell him. Mohamed Al-Wahab owns one half of the former state duplex in Remuera and says the first he heard of his neighbours' plans was when they came to him with an approved building consent at the weekend. They plan to knock down their half to build a freestanding home on their section. The Auckland Council deemed the effects on Mr Al-Wahab to be less than minor, so the neighbours did not have to notify him of their plans. He says if he had been told, he might have been able to work with the neighbours to find a solution.
But the whole thing done in secrecy, and I can't understand how the neighbour can do this, or the Auckland City Council.
Mohamed Al-Wahab, his neighbours could not be reached for comment. Regional councils are welcoming a government move to cut them out of managing 1080 poison use. The Environment Minister, Nick Smith, is proposing to make the rules for using 1080 and other pest control poisons nationally consistent. Ian Telfer reports.
1080 users have had to meet both the Environmental Protection Authority's national rules and local ones from regional councils. Nick Smith's plan is to kill off the regional ones. Local Government New Zealand says regional councils are pleased because the duplications are necessary and the national safeguards are ample. The Parliamentary Commissioner for the Environment, Jan Wright, says the change is exactly what she's been calling for 5 years. But a Waikato Regional Councillor who's anti-1080, Clyde Graff, says the plan's a way to expand 1080 use and knock out the community's objections. This is Ian Telfer.
The Hutt South MP, Labour's Trevor Mallard, says he's appalled that TB-infected possums were deliberately released into the Rimutaka Forest Park by a government agency. Landcare Research says as part of a project, 12 possums were infected and released in the study area. It says after 6 months, the 12 infected possums were caught and euthanised. Mr Mallard says every possum in the area should be destroyed as soon as possible. He says he also wants an assurance this kind of experiment will not be funded by the government again, as he says it was totally irresponsible. The Primary Industries Minister, Nathan Guy, says Mr Mallard is being mischievous as the area has had TB-infected possums in the area since the 1980s. The Defence Minister says the likely sale of 2 of the Navy's inshore patrol vessels is justified because they can't handle the big seas past New Zealand's 12 nautical mile territorial limit. He says the Navy has 8 fully operational patrol vessels, primarily used for fisheries protection, border control and search and rescue. The Minister, Jerry Brownlee, says once the ships are past the 12-mile mark, the conditions became too challenging. Opposition parties say inshore patrol vessels were never designed to operate outside of the 12-mile limit and into the exclusive economic zone. And they question if that's the reason for the likely sale, saying it's much more likely to be due to a lack of crew and resourcing. In sport, the LA Lakers star shooting guard Kobe Bryant has ended his basketball career with a 60-point game against the Utah Jazz in the NBA. Bryant, a 5-time NBA champion, finished his career with a 101-96 win over the Jazz. Following the game, the 20-year-old league veteran addressed the crowd, courtesy of Sky.
From the bottom of my heart, thank you. And what can I say? Mamba out.
Kobe Bryant. Meanwhile, the Golden State Warriors have broken the NBA record for the most wins in a season. The Warriors beat the Memphis Grizzlies 125-104 to record their 73rd win of the regular season, beating the previous record set by the Michael Jordan-led 95-96 Chicago Bulls. The White Ferns captain Susie Bates says she's looking forward to getting together with her Black Caps counterpart Kane Williamson to talk about batting and captaincy. The pair have been named the leading men's and women's players for 2015 by the cricketing Bible Wisden. And the former All Black lock Brad Thorne has joined the Queensland Reds coaching staff for the remainder of the Super Rugby season. That's the news.
Tonight on Night's fossilised parasites with Tommy Luang. Studying them is his specialty, although parasites are not things that fossilise easily, which is why you look for traces of them in fossilised poo instead, which will go nicely with an hour-changing word investigation into tapeworms, while Miles Buckingham keeps it seemly with another sweet selection of Jamaican music on Nights with me, Brian Crump, from after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Met Service weather through to midnight tomorrow. Northland, occasional rain today with a few heavy falls in the far north. Cloudy periods and the odd shower tomorrow, but rain returning to the north late in the day. For the remainder of the North Island, mostly fine, isolated showers about the South Taranaki tomorrow. Nelson, Marlborough and Canterbury, fine apart from some cloudy periods about Canterbury tomorrow. Buller and Westland, showers spreading north today, then clearing. Fine spells tomorrow and patchy late drizzle about Westland. Otago and Southland mainly fine, a few showers about Southland and Clutha until tomorrow afternoon. For Fiordland, occasional showers, and the Chatham Islands, cloudy periods and a few showers. It is 6:08.
Thanks. Katrina David says, don't worry about cauliflowers, John. Soon we'll be able to grow them on Scott Base. Sick, but very good. It's been revealed that the law firm at the centre of the Panama Papers is involved in an overseas investment land application here. The Labor Party says the government, which says it is aware of the application, is being remarkably complacent about it. Here's our Deputy Political Editor, Chris Bramwell.
Mossack Fonseca is the Panamanian law firm at the centre of the Panama Papers revelations. The leaked documents have shown how some wealthy people use offshore firms to evade tax and avoid sanctions. In Parliament this afternoon, Labour's finance spokesperson Grant Robertson asked what advice the government had received about an application to New Zealand's Overseas Investment Office that's connected with Mossack Fonseca.
Does the Prime Minister think that the Minister for Land Information should be updating him about an application to the Overseas Investment Office that is connected with Mossack Fonseca, given that this is one of the largest tax evasion scandals in history?
The Finance Minister, Bill English, answered on behalf of the Prime Minister.
He's certainly aware of the transaction, but the government's not in a position where it can direct the OIO in its investigations. If it forms a view that there's questions of good character involved, then I would expect that they would investigate those.
Grant Robertson then asked, given the Prime Minister was aware of the application, which country it came from.
The Honourable Bill English on behalf of
Mr. Speaker, I don't know.
Supplementary question, Mr. Speaker.
Supplementary question, Grant Robertson.
Is he concerned that directional foreign investment from the Cayman Islands and the British Virgin Islands, both known as tax havens, was more than $4 billion as at September 2015, nearly 7 times more than China, Germany and France combined?
Bill English replied that he was not particularly concerned about that.
The investment has to pass through the Overseas Investment Act criteria, of which there are around, I think, 23 tests. There's been court cases recently which have effectively lifted the thresholds. So wherever the investment came from, it's still got to pass our tests.
RNZ News has contacted the Land Information Minister's office for more detail about the application involving Mossack Fonseca, but has not received any response. From Parliament for Checkpoint, Chris Bramwell.
6:11. Police are investigating yet another dog attack, this one in Tokoroa, which has left a 16-year-old boy with serious chest, arm and leg injuries. The boy was with 3 friends when they were confronted by a 3-year-old boxer pit bull cross. Yesterday, the South Waikato District Council's compliance manager, Kerry Beckett, says it's a suggestion the dog was encouraged by its owner to attack the boys.
On one of the statements, the complainant said that in his statement that the owner, when he came to retrieve his dog, told the dog it was a good girl or something along those lines, good dog or something. So, you know, I mean, I can only assume what that means. The dog was handed over to us, so a voluntary surrender form, which means that the owner has said they no longer want that dog. So I think going by the officer in charge of the case, I think what was said was you can just kill it. So a handover was given to him and that was signed, which gives us the ability to euthanize that dog forthwith.
Kerry Beckett says the boys' 3 friends managed to tackle the dog and they sat on it until help arrived.
And prevented this attack from going on any longer until the owner had actually bothered to make its way there to retrieve it. It would have been an incredibly... I mean, they could have run. A lot of kids would. And I just think that they need to be shown some sense of appreciation for what they did for their friend. It would have been incredibly brave.
Kerry Beckett from the South Waikato District Council. As the Department of Internal Affairs undertakes a review into the most effective way of reducing exactly such dog attacks, the Minister responsible, Louise Upston, told us earlier in the program all possible solutions are on the table. But the head of the NZ American Pit Bull Association, Karen Batchelor, says the recent spate of dog attacks have been taken out of context, and she says she has the numbers to prove it.
Love them, love the bones of them, great dogs.
You see, I am thinking, goodness gracious me, and I suspect many of the people who are listening are thinking, what the hell is this woman on about? Because their reputation is as predators.
Oh yeah, they've got a terribly bad rap, there's no doubt about that, but there's no foundation in fact for it and certainly no sound science to support it. And when you get respected organisations and qualified scientists coming out and speaking out against breed-specific legislation, speaking up for the pit bull dogs, you've got to ask yourself, why would these professional organisations and professional people put their credibility on the line if there really is an inherent problem with the breed?
You see, Karen, I look back over my journalism career. One of the first ever stories I did was about a dog attack on a child. It was a pit bull. I play rewind in my mind of all the times I've covered dog attacks. It seems to me pit bulls bulls appear disproportionately often. Why?
That's because the media spotlights them disproportionately. And people just take what they're told in the news as facts. The media are trusted.
Are you arguing that there aren't a disproportionate number of pit bull attacks relative to other species?
No, as Abby van der Plas points out on her Christchurch Bull Breed Rescue Facebook page today, there have been 23 serious dog attacks in New Zealand since the beginning of April. We have only heard about the 4 involving bull breeds, and she's right on the money.
But are you saying to me on the radio that pit bulls aren't problematic?
No, no more so than any other dog. And as these professional organisations and scientists have pointed out, there is nothing wrong with the pit bull dog that not falling into the wrong hands doesn't fix completely.
Okay, so therein is the problem, isn't it?
Yep.
That this is a breed that is disproportionately likely to fall into the wrong hands. Can we agree on that?
Yeah, and again, thanks to the media hype, because they've made them, the devil's lapdog and all the rubbish about locking jaws and, sort of supernatural strength and aggression. And so your average criminal goes, that's the dog for me. I'm going to get me a scary dog. And, of course, then they take these marshmallows home and find out that they're actually just dogs.
You see, when you say marshmallows, I just am a bit incredulous about the description. Am I wrong?
Yeah, you are. You are completely wrong, I'm afraid. I've said before on the radio that if you want a guard dog, don't get one of these guys, because they're the worst guard dogs ever. They're guaranteed to lick your burglar's hand all the way to the safe or your money back. And that's a direct result of their fighting history, because people who fight their dogs have to be able to handle their dog in the pit. So a pit dog who bites his handler is a dead pit dog. And if that's not culling for temperament, what is?
Do you have pit bulls?
Of course I do.
How many do you have?
At the moment, I don't actually have any, but I've had many pit bulls over the last more than 22 years.
How many have you had, roughly?
Oh, a dozen.
Okay, and have they ever attacked anyone?
Yes, I got bitten by one of my own dogs when I bailed into a raging dog fight, and people get killed doing that. I was lucky. I just got a warning bite.
You see, I know what the emails are going to say when I read them after this interview.
She's been bitten by her own pit bull.
Yeah, and they're also going to say she's a breeder, she's a dog lover. You are swayed by your passionate inclination towards the species, towards the breed, sorry, not species, to overlook their shortcomings.
Well, in that case, you're going to have to say that the ASPCA and the American Bar Association, the National Animal Control Association, Dr. Ian Dunbar and the likes, they're all obviously on my side. They hold the same opinions as I do, because they're the people I quote, the people who are actually qualified to speak knowledgeably and based upon the sound science. What you're doing is you're listening to the media hype. You're taking it hook, line and sinker, as does the general public, no doubt about that. And then you're saying, look, we all know, we see in the news all the time, pit bulls, pit bulls, pit bulls. But hang on a second. Look at Surgeon Zachary Moaveni of Middlemore Hospital's research. He covered 10 years from 2004 to 2014, and 9,900 dog bites, over 5,800 of them serious enough to put somebody in hospital. So let's average that out at, say, 580 a year. Are you reading 580 pit bull attacks every year? Of course you're not. Half a dozen maybe, of dogs that can be accused of being a pit bull, and according to whose yardstick are they pit bulls?
The problem is then you're suggesting to me that these dogs are falling into the wrong hands. You're suggesting to me that they're falling into the hands of people who want them to be aggressive or who neglect them and mistreat them to the point that they inevitably become aggressive. So does there need to be some kind of register? Does there need to be greater control over who owns these dogs? Do owners need to be banned for life if their pit bulls go off the rails?
Well, that's such a blanket statement. I mean, dogs bite for all sorts of reasons. It's not always the owner's fault. Wade into a dog fight. See how long it is before you cop that redirected aggression. That's how Virginia Olsen was killed in Murupara. She simply got too close to a serious dog fight, and she died. Corro Dinsdale has dogs for pig dogs. New dog to the pack, I believe. There was a dog fight. He died. The woman up in Northland with the Malamutes, she died. So you can't say, should these people have been banned from owning dogs? Because no, they shouldn't have. They were just really unlucky that they did the wrong thing, and they paid the price.
Karen Batchelor, your emails are already coming in on that. Pensioners living in council housing in Horowhenua are worried they could lose their homes if the council goes ahead with plans to sell off the units. However, Horowhenua District Council says it will only sell to a provider that can guarantee the same or better services for tenants in the future. Ruth Hill has a look at this.
Foxton pensioner John Lyons fears his home of the last 8 years could be sold to a faceless corporation that doesn't care about him. He says he and his neighbours, who only found out about the council's plans at a meeting 2 months ago, are not reassured by anything they've been told so far.
It's just a whole pack of lies. They're changing the minds. Every week they've got a different idea. But the big idea is they're definitely going to sell these flats to pay their bills.
The Mayor of Horowhenua, Brendan Duffy, says a condition of any sale agreement is that all properties will remain community housing. He says under a community housing provider, tenants could actually be better off by up to $61 a week because they'll be able to qualify for the income-related rent subsidy offered by the government. Since central government scrapped capital grants for councils to build social housing some years ago, the clear message has been that councils need to focus on key infrastructure requirements, and pensioner housing isn't one of them.
The delivery of what's understood by a lot of people as social housing or community housing is not a piece of core responsibility of councils in government's mind, and it's becoming more prevalent in local government's mind as well.
However, the government's push for more private involvement makes some housing advocates nervous. The chairman of the Auckland Tenants Protection Association, Peter Klein, says some community housing agencies do a good job, but once that housing stock passes out of public hands, there's a danger it could be fully privatised.
The private rental sector generally doesn't have the welfare of the tenants necessarily as one of their main concerns. So a lot of these tenants are the most vulnerable types of people in society and already under pressure.
So far, 4 councils, Auckland, Hamilton, Christchurch and Whakatane District, have completed the process of handing over their social housing to community providers. The Director of Community Housing Aotearoa, Scott Figgenshow, says all the stock has gone to not-for-profit organisations, which is the best way of ensuring tenants' interests come first and the public retains the good of that investment made over generations. However, he says for the sector to grow and prosper, it needs the assurance from central government it will be able to access ongoing funding, especially in the form of income-related rent subsidies. Mr Figgenshow says it's not fair that council tenants can't get the subsidies now.
Why should a tenant lose out on access to rent subsidy simply because their landlord happens to have been a local authority? So if we're trying to level that playing field, let's make sure that this is about looking after tenants, making sure that they've got equal access to resources regardless of who their landlord is.
Meanwhile, Local Government New Zealand and other city councils are lobbying central government to be included in the income-related rent subsidy scheme. For Checkpoint, Ruth Hill.
6:22. Māori Development Minister Te Ururoa Flavel will push ahead with his controversial proposals to change the way Māori land is handled. He's introduced the Ture Whenua Māori Bill just 1 month after the Waitangi Tribunal asked for much more engagement with Māori before changing the law. But, as Lee Marama McLaughlin from Te Manu Korehi reports, the minister believes it ticks the boxes and is good to go.
Just after 11 o'clock this morning, Te Ururoa Flavel sent an email to reporters announcing a news conference in under 2 hours' time. He wanted to respond to the Waitangi Tribunal report on his review of Māori land laws, and after reading all 380 pages of the document, he had this to say.
After thorough consideration of the issues presented by the Tribunal and the ongoing work that has continued on Te Ture Whenua reform, I am pleased to announce that I have introduced that bill into the House today.
The tribunal report upheld several concerns claimants had about the bill, the key one being that consultation wasn't up to scratch. It warned that the minister needed to go out and get enough support from Māori or risk breaching the Treaty of Waitangi. But Mr Flavel says since that hearing, he's held 22 public hui and 14 wānanga. The bill has been tweaked, and he's sure he's got that vote of confidence now.
When we went out for hui in 2015, I think we're at version number somewhere between 3 and 5. We're now at version number 16, 17. Now, I'm not losing count. It just simply tells you that it has evolved, it has reacted It has addressed the concerns that have been raised.
But the lead claimant in the case that was taken to the tribunal, Maurice Lant, isn't convinced. She was denied a look at the newest version of the bill, and so a group of claimants has sent a complaint to the United Nations.
Māori landowners have not had an opportunity to see the latest version of the bill. How can we make decisions when we haven't seen any changes?
And you're not confident in taking his word for it?
No, we're not confident in taking the minister's word for it.
A vocal opponent of the review process, Labour's Meka Whaitiri, was shocked to hear the bill had been introduced.
It's interesting that he's had a briefing today at 1 o'clock media only, when really he hasn't done the decent thing and actually have a public one and invite lots of people who have been tracking these changes, like myself, to hear firsthand and maybe ask some questions. What do I say with the people out there? I'm disappointed. They'll be disappointed that they hadn't, at the very least, received any track changes.
Te Ururua Flavel says the Ture Whenua Māori bill will go through the select committee stage now, and people with concerns are able to make submissions. But Meka Whaitiri says realistically, Māori very rarely participate in that process, so it looks like the changes will stick, whether Māori like it or not. For Checkpoint, ko li Marama McLaughlin tēnei.
In the next 10 years, over 1 billion Asian consumers will move from lower to middle class. That means over 1 billion more people with more money to spend on things like, well, more expensive imported food. With that in mind, food producers in New Zealand are working out how this country could benefit from a burgeoning Asian middle class. The topic's being chewed over, at the High Value Nutrition Conference in Auckland. Among the people there is Dr. Stefan Hajkovic, who is the Brisbane-based author of Global Megatrend. I asked him what megatrend they're looking at.
The High Value Nutrition Conference is getting together a lot of experts, mostly from New Zealand, but also from around the world, to start to look at how New Zealand can really tap into what is a massive market of the new wealthy Asian consumer that wants a food product that is healthy, that is nutritious, that is safe, delivers on provenance, where did it come from. That market used to not exist, but it's growing now, and it's going to be massive by 2025.
Can you talk about the rate it's growing at?
So by 2025, roughly 1.02 billion Asians will cross an income threshold from being poor to middle income class, and plenty of movement up above that. And
over a billion between now and 2025.
Yeah, over a billion is a rough estimate.
And so one of the expressions of their new income is to shop for food in different ways.
That's right. We're seeing, to begin with, at lower levels of income growth, they increase daily calorie consumption, but then at higher levels of income growth, they diversify their diet, and they do start to become much more selective about what they eat. So that's the opportunity here, is not just to sort of shovel out heaps of food into export markets, but high quality food that fetches a price premium. And that's why the move makes a lot of sense. This is a new wealthy consumer. They care about food safety is huge, health and nutrition benefits. So we're only sort of still waking up to how much what we eat influences health and well-being and longevity. But then provenance too. Where did my food come from?
And has New Zealand got a good story in terms of how Asia views us, if they view us at all?
How you're perceived at the moment, definitely. I mean, the success of Fonterra and dairy products out of New Zealand tell that story really strongly. Following the melamine milk crisis in China of 2008, where milk products became contaminated, the New Zealand product will fetch a premium on the shelves, a price premium, because it's perceived rightly as being a safer product. And that lasted for quite some time.
Okay. Yep. The discussions we're having around high nitrate levels in our water, for example, and a greater move towards organics, which we're beginning to see in New Zealand farming.
Yes.
Is that important in Asia?
Look, I think it will be now. Our own research on Asian markets has shown that it's the organic consumer in China is still very small, and for South Korea, Taiwan, pretty similar too. So they're not huge markets yet, but they're showing large percentage year-on-year growth rates, so they're growing quite quickly, and I don't think we can discount it as we look into the future, that they actually care about whether or not the food they ate was grown in a sustainable way. But I mean, there's also, New Zealand is a beautiful place and has huge tourism value as well. The aim is to ensure that neither one of these opportunities extinguishes the other. So it's a joint thing that has to be delivered on, and the same challenge we've got in Australia. Australian agriculture is in a similar position. You know, we want to respond to these massive markets in Asia, but there is a story of environmental impact around agriculture.
And boy, that's a balancing act. All of it's a balancing
act. Absolutely.
Because if you have a billion new consumers consumers who aren't currently buying our food, who will be within actually the not too distant future at all, then you want to get quantity up to Asia. But the quality story is so important.
I think so. Quality story is highly important, and provenance. When you eat something, you want to know where it came from and how it got to you, because it's a pretty personal thing, putting it in your mouth, chewing it and swallowing it, right? This is something that we know the consumer cares a lot more than compared to, I don't know, when you put your petrol in the Bowser at the pump at the petrol station, you don't really think too much or care too much, as opposed to food is a different buying experience. You very much want to know. And I think, you know, what to me is quite exciting is digital technologies that are growing really fast as well, allow the farmer in New Zealand to close the gap and get personal with the supermarket consumer in Shanghai, so that they can, they swipe their iPhone over the tomatoes or the kiwi fruit that's being purchased there. They can see a story of where it came from, what the landscape looked like. But you've also got to have science and evidence to back it up. So that's the other part of what the HVN conference, the High Value Nutrition Conference, is doing. Is it's getting all the scientists together about the prove it to me factor. Prove it to me that NZ food is better. So if the two comes together, a marketplace perception with science and evidence, bang, that's a big score in the marketplace.
Bang. Stefan Hajkovic from the High Value Nutrition Conference in Auckland ending our program tonight. We'll be back tomorrow at 5. Thank you for being with us.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. The Associate Local Government Minister, Louise Upston, says she's open to every suggestion on how to curb dog attacks. The government has asked the OAO to review a 2014 decision to allow a land purchase by an overseas person with a connection to the law firm at the centre of the Panama Papers. An Auckland man says he's shocked his neighbours got permission to remove half of the building he lives in without having to tell him. And regional councils are welcoming a government move to cut them out of managing 1080 poison use. Our next news and weather is at 7.